Okay, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ed Dunn. I'm privileged to be chair of the Board of Trustees for the SRA, and also pleased to be chairing this afternoon's panel immediately after lunch. So we're going to be keeping an eye on you all and make sure everybody's tip-top and not having a snooze after the lunch. It's quite a strange thing to be standing here looking at everybody waving fans. It's we were just commenting whether we were in an auction house. If anyone wants to make any bids, just be careful. Or whether we were sort of in the court of the Sun King and someone was going to be coming down with the fan in some sort of weird dance. But I mean, feel free, but it might put off our speakers. But anyway, I hope you enjoy this afternoon's session, all of them, not just this one, and that they prove to be as useful and rich and amazing as this morning's sessions. So, to our speakers, in a change to the advertised programme, Alex has unfortunately injured her wrist and isn't able to make it, but she's been very ably replaced by her colleague Rob Street, who has joined us from the Nuffield Foundation to run through their contribution to a session on what makes a good funding application. Beccy from the ESRC is Deputy Director for Data Strategy and Infrastructure at the ESRC, and Beccy has responsibility for ESRC's large-scale social science data collection and services. Beccy was also until recently, co-chair of the Pride Network at UKRI. Beccy's committed to inclusive and equitable data practices as well as fully inclusive ways of working, and Beccy has been in this space for well over 20 years, so really looking forward to hearing Beccy's contribution to the discussion today. Rob is the Nuffield Foundation's Director of Justice and is responsible for overseeing and developing over £7 million worth of research projects in the justice space. And prior to joining the foundation, Rob was head of evidence and effective practice at the Youth Justice Board, and before that was a social researcher at the Home Office, working in the crime and justice statistics space. So, without further ado, we're going to hand over to Beccy first, and our speakers are going to do around about 10 minutes of presentations, and then it's very much open to a Q&A. So as this morning, please feel free to use the app. I don't quite know how many points you get for a question, but give it a go. And then we've got roving mics. I've got a few questions, but I'm quite sure we're going to have enough to ask our speakers about at the end for 20-25 minutes. Beccy, over to you.
Thanks, Ed. Thanks very much. It's really great to be here today. I've really enjoyed this morning, some really, really interesting sessions. I feel mine might be a little bit of a letdown in that it's not got lots of exciting AI and things in it, but yeah, some really good stuff today. So what I wanted to talk about is some of the sort of wider context that UKRI is working in at the moment and how that kind of affects the focus that we're taking in terms of funding and things like that. So you may have seen that we have a new kind of strategic framework at UKRI, and we have a new mission, which is advancing knowledge, improving lives, and driving growth. And this is very much focusing our work and how kind of the funding is structured across UKRI. So previously, we would have had different sort of allocations of funding to each of the different research councils, and then those research councils would have been responsible for deciding how to prioritise what was spent. So we've always had a large kind of curiosity-driven element to our funding, which has been known as responsive mode, but is moving into being called applicant-led mode. So that's the top kind of line you'll see in the chart there. And then there have been other kind of strategic and targeted kind of research delivered at council level and then also across all the councils too. Some of that now is being delivered at a kind of UKRI level. So there's a big focus on the 8 kind of growth areas within the industrial strategy. And we've got programme boards for all of those 8 areas, and there is specific funding kind of earmarked to that, which is what you'll see in the second line. Sorry, we call them buckets. There's been lots of discussion about buckets, but that's what we've got. So bucket 2 is the kind of strategic government, the industrial strategy, things like the government missions and other areas. The third one is around supporting innovative companies. So again, we've had kind of some of that work through Innovate UK, but it's definitely much more kind of looking to embed that across the whole programme in terms of the research and innovation that we support and deliver. And then the fourth one, which is the one I have to say I'm a bit more familiar with, which is bucket 4, which is the critical enablers, which is where we have our data infrastructure. So that's the area at ESRC that I'm responsible for, large-scale surveys, things like Understanding Society, and the kind of the cohorts at CLS at UCL and things like that, as well as our UK data service and Closer. And so that goes into bucket 4. As I said, we've always had this kind of large kind of commitment to applicant-led research, so really driven by the research community, asking the questions that they want to ask and to have answers for. And we've got a strong commitment to continuing supporting that. We've actually maintaining levels of investment in that space and committed to protecting these areas. There are some areas where we have had to have cuts following our spending review with the government, but this is an area that very much committed to maintaining. So we're taking on a new approach to applicant-led funding. You may have seen there have been a couple of calls out already this year with sort of pilots, and there will be some more coming out in the autumn and then into next year as well. I'll go into a bit more detail about those in a minute. But this is the first kind of comprehensive refresh we've done in the ESRC for decades in terms of how we deliver the applicant-led mode. And the idea is that it will help us kind of produce a coordinated portfolio of opportunities to make sure that we're meeting the needs across all disciplines and different areas. We want to get funding to kind of curiosity-driven ideas quickly while they're still fresh and timely, rather than having a big time lag between funding going in and the actual research starting and getting done. We also want to kind of encourage agility and innovation and excellence, and making sure that we can maximise flexibility and minimise restrictions. I think anyone who's looked at ESRC or UKRI's forms and things online will know sometimes they're not always the most flexible. So we are working to kind of look at ways in which we can improve that experience. We also want to bring greater transparency and consistency to how we kind of make the decisions and how we make sure that we can help social science research thrive. So the key changes that you'll see are around more outcome-focused approach. So this is very much driven across the whole of UKRI, but it does then enable more freedom for applicants to determine what they feel are the best activities to deliver those aims. We also want to do more strategic management and curation of the portfolio, as I said, to make sure that we've got lots of kind of disciplines and different areas covered. We're not repeating the kind of same projects, and making sure we've got a broad range of things covered. We're looking at greater support for novelty, disruption, and responsible risk-taking. So again, I think we're probably known as quite a cautious organisation. We obviously have, great responsibility for public money, and so we take our kind of responsibilities very seriously. But we do think there's real value in that novelty and the risk-taking. Having seen the talk this morning about kind of using AI at the UK HSA, I think that was a really great example of where it's worth trying something, and even if it doesn't work out, you still learn from those mistakes. So. And then, as I mentioned, we're looking at sort of faster funding as well. So shorter term, varying different levels of amounts of money to apply for, so that, again, we can get that kind of research happening more quickly and innovatively. So these are the new applicant-led opportunities. I've got slides on each one, but I'm not sure that I'll have time to kind of go through all of them, so I'll just talk about them fairly quickly. But there is information up on the UKRI and ESRC websites if you want more information, or do come and grab me as well. So 2 we've launched in the spring, React and Connect. React is a kind of smaller award for our sort of purposes of £50,000 to £100,000 up to 6 months. And that call is still open. So the idea of that one is to offer a fast route to fund projects that help address time-critical public sector challenges. So say that's still open. So do take a look at that one. The next one has actually closed. It's called Connect. And the idea of that was to provide funding to test new or high-risk ideas and build collaboration in. That has closed in June, and awards will start in October. We're in the process of sort of reviewing those and so on. And then, let me just move on to, so that's Grow and Explore. Challenges, oh no, hang on a minute, I've just zoomed through those, excuse me. Yes, so Grow is the next one. So this will be for awards from 18 months to 5 years, around 100 to 500K. And this will always be open, so it'll be kind of rolling assessment. So rather than having specific deadlines to go to, it'll be rolling. And so that's, again, to try and help researchers build up their skills and experience and confidence in new areas, taking the next step in careers and things like that. So we're also trying to target lots of different areas of the kind of research life cycle in terms of people's careers, spans and so on, and where they are at in that. Explore is to back individuals or small teams to advance knowledge with innovative and disruptive ideas. So again, really stressing that kind of idea of trying things, innovating, and so on. And that will be opening in the autumn as well, and that'll be awards for up to 5 years, and a bigger pot for that one. So the awards will be between £300,000 and £2 million. And then the last one is Challenge, and this is the sort of the much bigger scale projects. So where it will require kind of bigger collaborations, complex projects and problems to work on, kind of ambitious projects at scale. And so that's around £2 million to £10 million, and that will be opening in the spring. So I just wanted to kind of finish up really with a bit of advice on what this sort of new approach means in terms of what we're talking about. So I mentioned that we're looking at things being a lot more outcome focused. And, you know, it's important that you're kind of, if you are putting a proposal in, that it explicitly addresses the outcomes we're looking for. So please do kind of make sure you read the fine print and have a think about what kind of outcomes. You know, we want to see real impact from our funding, so we're really keen to see what those outcomes will be. Don't feel that you should be restricted by previous schemes. So again, it is quite a big change for us. So do take a kind of fresh look if you've looked at us before and thought that's not for me. You know, we do still have some requirements about institutional affiliation and things like that, but it might be that there is something actually that does fit within your kind of plans. We hope that there'll be more freedom for you to determine the best activities to deliver your aims. So again, to give you a bit more freedom about how you go about your research and what you do. The existing responsive modes that we've got open at the moment will close once the new schemes are on offer. So that will be in the autumn. So it might be worth you kind of considering. You can absolutely apply to the end of that kind of scheme, but you might want to think about whether you want to do that or wait for the new ones. Sometimes we have a bit of a peak when there's a deadline coming up and something's closing, so you might find that success rates are a bit less, are a bit harsher at that point because there'll be more applications. So do have a think about that. So I've really focused here on the kind of applicant-led approach. We do have other areas of funding as well. So the area that I was speaking about kind of in infrastructure, we also have other areas, things like our skills and talent and research development portfolios as well. So again, do keep a lookout on the website for those things. And we will be we had a town hall meeting a couple of weeks ago, I think 2 weeks ago, where some of this was shared. And there will be another one with updates in September. So please do look out for that webinar. Thank you.
while we are, I'll just say good afternoon, everybody. It's very good to be here. As Ed said. Great, thank you. I'm not Alex Beer, but I am Rob Street from Nuffield Foundation, and I'm really pleased to be here to talk about this question about what makes a good funding application. So what I'm going to do in my 10 minutes, I'm going to start with a little bit of context about sort of how we sort of see our role in responding to a changing world and what that means for us as a funder, and I guess also for us as a research community. Talk a little bit about Nuffield and our priorities and our areas of focus. Then come on to this question of what we look for in applications to Nuffield. And finish with just a few reflections on the kind of challenges and issues emerging facing us as a funder, and again, I think maybe as a research community more widely. So, changing landscape. You'll know all this, but it's important context and worth kind of rehearsing that there are a number of social challenges at the moment, I think, that make all our work as social researchers more urgent and complex. So the UK has real strengths as a high-quality knowledge economy to which social science plays an important role. But we also know we're stuck in a period of entrenched low economic growth, persistent inequalities, and, of course, an ongoing cost of living crisis. We are seeing a more sort of febrile, fragmented political context, which is feeding through into more polarised social and political debates. Irresistible rise of new technologies, especially AI. I know you've been talking about that already today, and what the opportunities and challenges that raises for us, both personally and professionally, in all our lives. And also would flag the importance or significance of low levels of trust in key institutions among certainly at least some of the population. And that's not an exhaustive list. Obviously, I could have mentioned climate change, the effects of which we're all living through at the moment, and big demographic changes like an ageing society. So I mention that because there's a kind of question on what that means for us all, and particularly in terms of what it means for us as funders, is how do we engage with the scale and pace of change at the moment? How can we be alive and responsive to emerging issues, but also still open to addressing the longer term and perennial ones that we all see in our specific areas of focus? We need to be more focused on impact, and I'll talk again about this, what impact means, what are the best routes to achieving it and sustaining it. Supporting innovation. Can we do things differently? Can we look at old problems in new ways? Supporting a strong, diverse and engaged research community, and that's important in two ways. It's important, obviously, just from a point of view of equity and inclusion, but I think it's also important because greater diversity of approach and perspective is more likely to help us address the sorts of challenges I've just been talking about. And lastly, while funding individual projects, teams, institutions is at the heart of what we do, we're also thinking hard about what we can do to support capacity building in the research sector. So, quick segue into telling you a bit more about Nuffield. Some of you will know who we are, some of you won't. That's the long version on our website. The short version is Nuffield is a financially and politically independent charitable trust established in 1943 with a mission to advance social well-being. And we do that primarily through funding research and innovation and encouraging the use of evidence. We have a big focus on inequalities and vulnerabilities that people face and what they do to hinder people's life chances. Last year, we spent we awarded about £16 million worth of new grants, so we're pretty small compared with our colleagues in the research councils, but in our particular areas of traditional focus like education and justice, we are a significant funder. So that's Nuffield. In the interest of time, I won't talk about our values, but it's kind of shot through everything I'm talking about today. So we launched a new strategy last summer. We called it a strategic review, but it is really a strategy. And these are the sort of 5 overarching questions and the connections between them that are guiding our funding decisions over the next 5 years. Some build on our existing strengths and others take us into new areas, and we're sort of refining them as we go through the strategy period, but they're all there set out in detail if you look on our website. So just very quickly, how can we build a prosperous and fair society? How can we build a more inclusive society where people thrive and feel they belong? How can we ensure developments in science and technology work for people? How can we develop climate policies that promote a prosperous, fair and inclusive society? And how can we build and maintain effective, accountable and trustworthy institutions? So those are our kind of 5 headline questions, if you like, and which we are addressing through our funding programmes. So just to briefly run through these, I should say at the outset, they're all open calls, so anyone can apply. The application process is relatively straightforward, I think. Our main fund is our main grants fund. That's our sort of main vehicle, really, for how we address our aims, how we kind of allocate research funding. Those have 2 rounds a year, usually October, deadline rounds, October and April. Those are for grants up to about 500,000, and at the lower end, sometimes just 5 or 10,000, so they sort of run the range. We also have a larger strategic fund for bigger, more ambitious projects from £1 million upwards. And we have 2 specific funds as well. Firstly, Racial Diversity UK, that's relatively new. We set it up a couple of years ago, which is looking at funding research to help us understand the barriers and pathways to a more racially just and inclusive society within the particular context of the UK's colonial past. And also the Oliver Bird Fund, which is actually Bird's custard money. That's our only custard-related fund, but which is looking at the challenges of working into later life with a health condition or disability. And it's looked particularly at musculoskeletal conditions. So those are our sort of funding programmes. So all the details on the funding page on our website. Do take a look. The application process, same for them all. It's pretty standard in that it's a 2-stage process. You have an initial outline. Then if you get shortlisted as a longer, fuller application, shortlisted applications go to external peer review. The final decision is made by staff and trustees, our grants committee. It's a very competitive environment. I'm sure you know that, but it's getting kind of increasingly so. And one thing we do say is, if pre-application, if you're not sure about whether your idea might fit with Nuffield, you are welcome to contact us and even send us a kind of 1-page of your idea and ask whether we think it's a good fit and it's worth you applying. So, on to the actual exam question. What do we look for in applications? Well, again, do look at our guide for applicants. That tells you everything you need to know. There's also an eligibility checker. I won't go through that, but that's on our website. I guess the kind of overarching point is that the strongest applications are those that clearly address important social questions with the right methods and a credible route to real-world change. We have our 5 kind of key assessment criteria, which are listed on the left, on the core foundations. So, firstly, the project's relevance and importance. You really got to make the case for this. What is the question you want to address? Does your research have the potential to improve people's lives? Is there a theory of change to it? What's your kind of conceptual underpinning or hypotheses? Importantly, how would it add to the existing evidence base? What's the kind of distinct contribution that your project would make? What's the added value? Robust and appropriate methodology. We fund quant, qual, mixed methods, innovative methods. We're open to all of those. The thing that we say is whatever method you're using, it has to be robust and appropriate for your particular research questions. I've already mentioned impact once, but credible impacts, pathway to impact is really kind of key. Understanding who your audiences are, your pathways to reaching them, and how you might persuade people to bring about the change you're hoping to see through your research. Looking for a capable team with the right skills, and that's not just in research terms, that might also include around things like comms and engagement and project management. And lastly, of course, good value for money. Is the budget look appropriate? Does it look does it align with the questions you're trying to answer? And then on the right-hand side, there are some factors that are we're taking account of that I think are becoming kind of increasingly important. So I mentioned our new strategy. We do want to see an alignment with our priority questions, but as I think you've seen, those are so kind of broad, I think you should be able to link a specific topic through a series of steps to those questions. Increasingly, we're interested in seeing inclusive approaches to research that reflect and engage diverse experiences, responsible use of data and AI as part of an ethical approach to research generally, innovation where it adds value, and a kind of wider point about an ability to address complexity but still deliver impact within an individual project. Okay, so I mentioned impact already. Just very briefly to say about this, we set out these sort of 5 impact types, and we would expect every research application to us to speak to at least one of those. And again, on our website and in our guide for applicants, if you want to look at those in detail, including some examples of what we take as kind of good actions under each of those categories. So things to avoid. Well, in some ways, these are the kind of flip side of the positives. These are some weaknesses that come up quite frequently in outline applications to us. Lots of proposals try and do too much. I know that might sound strange because in a way we kind of want, to get as much for our money as we can. But some applications are combining too many methods or stages in one project, and that kind of raises concerns about deliverability and clarity. Secondly, weak pathway to impact. I've already talked about this, not clearly explaining how you think the research might be able to bring about to real-world change and how your findings will be able to reach, say, policymakers or practitioners or just the audiences for your research. Thirdly, poorly explained methods. And again, I've already mentioned this, but what we're looking for is making sure that your methods are clearly explained and they're appropriate and robust. But it really helps if you can explain which methods and how will answer which of your research questions. So we get that sense of it's really kind of your methods are clearly integrated with what you're trying to do overall. A couple of things I'd add to that, not shown here, but some applications just don't really make a sufficiently strong case for the relevance and importance of what they want to do. I mean, the key question is why do this particular research now? Sort of relatedly, what would the added value be? Assuming there's already knowledge in this area, how would it build on the existing evidence base? As I said, what would it be its distinct contribution? Realistic resourcing and budget, and a timeline to the project. And on a more practical point, just applications sometimes being poorly or unclearly written. And that obviously doesn't encourage kind of confidence on our side that the applicant is clear about what they want to do and why, and possibly might even sort of raise questions about the sort of the clarity of the final outputs and their ability to influence other people. So, final point from me, just some kind of challenges that we see arising. I've mentioned already the increasing volume of applications. Grants rounds are becoming much more competitive. They're increasing at a much faster rate than our available funding, unfortunately. So that is a challenge we have to face. Taking account of new methodological and theoretical developments and other new approaches in research, that's something we want to keep an eye on. We like to see that in research, but how is it being done? Is research sort of at the borders, at the pushing forward new developments? Ensuring meaningful inclusion of affected groups in research in a way that's not tokenistic. Trade-offs. That's quite an economist type statement there, trade-offs in a constrained fiscal environment. But I think what we mean by that is we can't fund everything ourselves. And equally, as researchers, if you're making recommendations at the end, you've got to think what's achievable and possible within this kind of the environment we're in. System level change. Most research projects only speak to specific issues. How can we use evidence to drive more systemic change, which is often the underlying factor in lots of the policy areas we focus on. And lastly, of course, we're always thinking about how can we better strengthen the links between research, policy and practice. Okay, and finally, just some ways to keep in touch, but you don't need to note those down because they're all on our website and you can pick them up there. So I will finish there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. Really interesting stuff there. For everyone who's looking to make applications to either of you or funding more generally. So we've got a whole host of questions that have come in here on the app. I've given Becky the tip off, as some of you may notice, that the most popular one is for about UKRI. So we'll start, if that's okay, with UKRI, and Rob can have a drink of water and prepare for the next one. But so the most popular that's been voted on here is to qualify as a research organisation. It feels UKRI prioritises bigger organisations with lots of governance for research in place. Of course, yeah, I'm so sorry. I should have gone more slowly. So, to qualify as a research organisation, it feels UKRI prioritises bigger organisations with lots of governance and capacity for research in place. Do you have any advice for community-based participatory organisations who are applying as a research organisation who might not have those levels of governance?
Yes, so I should just caveat this by this is not my area of expertise, but I will let you know what I know, and certainly I'm happy to kind of answer as far as I know. So we do have some different routes to being a kind of recognised organisation that we would support. So there is the kind of standard research organisation, which does tend to be the larger scale universities, academic institutions, research institutions, etc. We have another route, which is the IRO, the Independent Research Organisations, which does allow for much smaller organisations to qualify for our funding. So that is certainly a route that some organisations can go through. It does have some still requirements around having things like a research strategy and having some of that governance and so on in place already. I mean, this is really, again, because as I kind of mentioned earlier, because we are responsible for public money, it's important that we can know that the organisations that we are funding will have the kind of capacity to be able to manage that in an appropriate way, and hence the need for governance. The other route that I would suggest as well is also looking at partnerships and collaborations. So if you are a smaller charity, a smaller organisation, then absolutely please do contact researchers at some of the larger institutions and make sort of meaningful partnerships and collaborations with people that might then be able to say be the named person or the named institution on a bid, but that that you are properly working in collaboration and partnership. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And quite a few questions from freelancers and much smaller organisations. So I think your answer is relevant to all those who've asked that as well. Okay, perhaps one for Rob here. What makes a funding application stand out? Is research inclusion a fundamental requirement?
It could be. I mean, it depends a bit on the project and how we define that. I think it's really the points I was making about being kind of clear on relevance, impact, rigour, team, value for money. I think being clear about who your kind of target groups are, your beneficiary groups are, and that might well come back to the point about involving them appropriately. I think that is important. It's, as I said, it kind of often comes back to making this kind of clear case for why fund this research now. What we find is that sometimes that we get good ideas that sort of pass that relevance test. Sometimes they fail on sort of impact approach and deliverability. And inclusion might well be part of that as well.
Fab, thank you. Okay, for either of you, then we've heard today about the value of being flexible according to the needs of the research cohort in order to be inclusive. How open would you be as funders to a method and approach that changes mid-project?
So like a sort of co-design type method, maybe where you don't know what you're going to do. Perhaps you've worked with the groups, sort of the groups of interest to develop methodology. I'm going to take that as an example.
I think potentially, or where something arises as to be more inclusive, there's a need for a change.
It does happen, and in fact, I think it's good if research and the research team can be kind of flexible and respond to changing circumstances. Obviously, as a funder, we'd want to check what that change was and look at the sort of what it meant for the project's aims and other, practical issues like budgets and timescale. But certainly we do see, and I know this issue does come up specifically about things like co-design and action research, where perhaps you don't know at the outset exactly the approach you're going to be pursuing after a while. And I think that's okay. You've got to show that you're aware of that and show how you will manage it and perhaps what the kind of parameters are around where the project will go. But it's
Yeah, and I think as well, just making sure that you're keeping in touch with the funder as that process is happening, so that you're communicating where the changes are. If we know about them, it's much easier than if we find out about things retrospectively. I think, as you say, that is part of, that's kind of the exciting part, isn't it, of doing research, is you don't always know where it's going to end up.
Great. There are a lot of questions on here. I was also going to give the opportunity for any questions in the room, if anyone's got one. Oh, right at the back there, straight away. Go on then.
Thank you. Thank you for all your insights, really helpful. I just wondered if you had any advice for researchers that are seeking funding for creative, participatory, basically non-traditional methodologies. How do you assure yourselves that it's sufficiently robust and capable of generating the level of evidence that you're seeking?
So I think I'll have a go at this one. I would say, again, it goes back to things that Rob was saying about, if you've got a research question and creative and participatory methods are the most appropriate to answer that question, then I think that's a big part of it, is making sure that those things align. And also, I think, we do fund, that's why, again, I was sort of talking particularly today about the applicant-led mode, because it is very much driven by what, researchers want and what the research need is. And we do have peer review on that. So, again, it will be then sort of analysed and assessed by experts as well. So I think that's where that sort of robustness comes in as well.
Yeah, exactly. Obviously, we would seek advice if we weren't experts at Nuffield upon the method, but we do fund quite a few projects, or do and have funded quite a few projects already that use participative and more creative methods. So we're certainly open to it. I guess it's obviously for you as an applicant to show why that's the most appropriate method to address your question and kind of make us confident that you're sort of on top of the best way of doing that. And then we would use kind of external expert advice to help us make an assessment of that. But it's certainly we do welcome applications that seek to use kind of less traditional methods.
Okay. Okay. And then one last question from me then, which is similar to a couple that are on here. So are you using AI to assess bids? And are you seeing an increase in applications using AI? And if so, what advice or warnings would you give in that space?
So in terms of us using AI to assess, I am not aware that any of the teams are doing that, but I can certainly go back and ask. But we absolutely are seeing an increase in the number of applications generally, and specifically those that have used AI. I would say if you are using AI, obviously check the kind of, terms and conditions that it's acceptable for the proposal you're putting in. Do use it where it's useful. I would suggest that you take out the lines where it says, here's what you asked for, and don't just copy and paste. But obviously also do acknowledge where you have used AI and kind of make sure that you're doing that in a responsible way.
Just to add to that, we're actually in the process at the moment of formulating our policy on the use of AI in grant assessment and grant making, but I imagine it'll be quite similar to ones that UKRI, Welcome, other big funders are applying. So we understand there are efficiencies for people making applications in using AI. We understand that. We can help sharpen up content. But of course, you know, the fundamentals, the researcher remains accountable for issues around integrity, originality, reliability, confidentiality. And I guess a point to add is that overuse of AI can result in quite generic, formulaic applications that are perhaps less impactful than ones that have clearly been written by the research team with their particular interest in mind. So there's a practical point.
You particularly like the responses that start with, this is a very intelligent question to ask. Maybe that's just my querying, but anyway, there we go. Listen, fantastic. We are pretty much out of time there. I'm going to encourage Beccy and Rob to get on the Hoover app and respond to the one or two questions that are remaining, because you can post replies. So for those of you who've got a question or didn't get chance to run through them all, we'll get answers on the app. And then last but not least, the winner of the auction is the lady at the back. So that's a lot of money to pay, but sorry about that. But that's all good. The next session is back to the various breakouts, so I hope that you know where you're going. You've got roughly 5 minutes or so to get there. And last but not least, I want to thank our speakers, thank you, thank our interpreter, and the tech wizards up in the room at the back. So thank you, Beccy and Rob, for a great session.